What's up, everybody? It is Izzy back with today's Q&A. I'm a little bit sick, so bear with me here on the volume. I'm doing my best to read this loudly. Today was my first day bringing in a new lateral movement. This is a standing lateral on the manufacturer's Icarian. A lot of Icarian equipment in this gym, actually. It's not bad stuff at all. It's old school, but it's not bad at all. I'm alternating this and the seated lateral because my seated lateral had stalled out doing it every time. And alternating two movements just means I have 8 days between each attempt, which makes it easier to set PRs versus every 4 days. How does the devolume method work on movements where you're only doing one set? It doesn't really. So personally, I don't really do devolumes if I'm doing one set on most of my exercises. I will just take time off instead. But there's other things that you could do. I mean, you could lower the RPE, the RAR, or that is, leave reps in the tank. You could do a lighter variation of that movement. You could raise the rep range. That might have a similar impact, not quite as much, obviously. But yeah, devolume doesn't really work if you're at the point where you're doing just one set. The one important thing to note about this set here that I'm going to talk about throughout the rest of today is that I obviously have a really bad imbalance going on between my right and left pec. I was able to lock out that 225 incline on the left side really easily, and the right side wasn't even close. So something I'll be addressing here later as well, but a big priority for me. Thoughts on ascending sets for powerlifting? None. I don't think about ascending sets for powerlifting. This is me trolling this guy because I warned everyone yesterday. If you ask me thoughts on questions, you got a 50-50 shot at getting trolled, and this person rolled the dice and they got the troll heads. Double trolls. So, trolled. Obviously, ascending sets for powerlifting are fine. You really have to do ascending sets if you're using an RPE method where you use it to gauge your top set for the day. Is it also the case for hypertrophy trainees that they need to increase the volume over their career, just like it is in powerlifting? So this depends on how we measure volume for both sports. If we're talking about the number of hard sets, no, I actually don't think that needs to increase, and very often it will actually decrease as you get significantly stronger. However, if we're talking about volume load, like tonnage, weight, times sets, times reps, that almost certainly will increase over time in both sports. But I don't think it's necessarily a fact that you're going to have to do more quote-unquote volume to get better over your career. Yesterday, I put up a poll asking if I look like a completely different person in 2014 versus 2021. Like 85% of people voted yes. So this person said, given the results of the poll, do you feel any different? Like literally a different person? No, I don't. I've been me the whole time, so, I think when people get used to seeing you online, they get used to like a certain version of you, and that's the only version of you that they know. But and for me, I've been me my whole life, so I've been many different versions of me, and I'm not as identified with my body and my look as other people are. I find that interesting, actually. Exercise tips for side glutes. My wife asked me to help her focus on them. So anything for glute medius, you're going to want to do unilateral work, front foot elevated split squats or lunges, things of that nature. You could do the bad girl machine as well, but that wouldn't be my first choice. As for the rest of this video, you'll see that I was able to do 280 pounds or 127 kilos for 6 reps with my right side. This is a machine fly. And the reason why that's notable is because on the next video, you'll see what I'm able to do with my left side. So I did have a right pec tweak semi-recently, and I've actually had many right pec tweaks over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's kind of rearing its ugly head into a nasty imbalance at this point. What does a full day of eating look like for Izzy? So I eat 5 meals a day typically. 4 of them are going to be rice, chicken, spinach, bell pepper, pineapple, and a potato. I have some Greek yogurt in there as well. And then my last meal of the day is pretty fat heavy. It's going to be salmon, spinach, bell pepper, pineapple, and sunflower seeds. That's been the same base diet that I've had for just about 2 years straight now, because that's really what bodybuilding is. Nothing really changes, just the amount of the food. When you diet, you have less of it. When you gain weight, you have more of it. Anyway, this is my left side. As you can see, I did 6 reps as well, but probably 10 RIR to be honest.
No, don't make your technique worse. Frequency is not an independent driver of gains. It's not at all. So you want to do something that improves SFR instead, which means lower your volume potentially. If your volume's already at 1 set to failure, you could try leaving reps in reserve, for example. But definitely don't make your technique worse. That's the weirdest way of thinking that I've come across recently. No. Again, frequency is not an independent driver of progress. So you don't need to aspire to a high frequency.
There is validity to that. Does that mean it's the only consideration and you should always train short bias movements first?
Absolutely not. For example, in the example that you're using here, leg extensions versus leg press or squat, oftentimes squats or leg presses are going to have a higher priority for the lifter, so it doesn't really matter that one is lengthen biased and one is short biased, because leg extensions are simply not as stimulative for the quads as squats and leg press.
With the top set back off method, do you bump up the rep ranges for isolations? Instead of doing 5 to 10 to 10 to 15, do you do 10 to 15 to 15 to 20? Sure, on movements that benefit from a higher rep range, that's what I do. But I don't necessarily automatically use higher rep ranges just because something's in isolation. For example, I like really heavy calf work. Kona likes to bark. I also like really heavy bicep work. So I still determine ideal rep ranges based on the movement that I'm using. And I don't just automatically use higher reps because something is in isolation. And for that matter, I don't automatically use lower reps because something is a compound. So for example, hack squats, for me, do not have a good SFR in the 5 to 10 rep range. Maybe more like in the 8 to 12, yes, but preferably for me, it's actually 10 to 15 where I get the best effect from hack squats. And hack squats are a compound. On the other hand, like I said, I really like doing curls in the 5 to 10 rep range, and I feel a ton of tension in my biceps doing that. So it's a movement by movement thing.
You would start off by increasing 2% every time for as long as you could, and then when that stopped working, you'd have to use a different solution. You could definitely try repeating each weight twice. You could use daily undulating periodization, or not daily undulating, but some sort of undulating periodization where you picked different weights and you hit them only once every second or third rotation. So there's different options there, but if you run into a situation where the rate by which you can increase is too much to sustain microcycle to microcycle jumps, then you're going to have to use a slightly different progression method to make it work. One of the most typical examples of this is dumbbells. And so what I do for dumbbells, instead of trying to put magnets on like 115s or something, is I'll just pick 3 different dumbbells, and I will do each dumbbell. So let's say I'll do the 105s, the 110s, the 115s, and I'll only come back every third time. So several weeks have gone by the time I get back, and I should be able to beat the PR I got with that dumbbell the first time, if that makes sense.
Is overhead tricep work needed for complete tricep development? No. So every tricep exercise that extends the elbow is going to train all 3 heads of the tricep. However, there are certain types of tricep extensions that will emphasize the long head more than others, and those namely are tricep extensions done with the shoulders in extension. And that's easiest to do overhead, but you can also do things like the lying tricep extension where it goes behind your head, and cross-body extensions also will work the long head to some degree. And it's a good idea to rotate variations throughout the year anyway. This next question is asking about cable to pulley ratios. Is there any difference between 10 pounds on a 2-to-1, 20 pounds on a 1-to-1, or 40 pounds on a 1-to-2 for the end user? No. The only thing that's going to be confusing for some people is when they go to a cable stack and it says 40 pounds, but it feels like 20 pounds on the cable stack that they're used to using. And that's really the only difference. In terms of physics, it should be exactly the same, but it will confuse you why sometimes you're going to use a cable stack or a machine that seems way heavier than the weight that it lists, or it seems way lighter than the weight that it lists, and it's because of the cable pulley ratio. How much do you expect to add to a movement per year? Using the 1% rule would equal 50% a year, but obviously that's not going to happen. You're going to have to swap exercises every now and again. So for a million reasons, I'm sure you will understand I cannot tell everybody how much they should expect to add. It's going to be different not only between individuals, but between movements. There might be some movements where you add 5% and some movements where you add 20%. For example, in my last cycle, where I pushed my body weight up to 270 pounds, I took my RDL from 545 pounds to 645 pounds. It took like 3 months. That's not something you would ever expect, but it happened. What do you think about ab, forearm, and trap direct work? This is dangerously close to a thoughts on question, isn't it? Here's the thing. Any muscle group that you want to grow to maximal size, you need to train it directly. But there are certain muscle groups that will grow aesthetically or proportional for competitive physique purposes without direct work. And the abs, the traps, and forearms all fall into that category. So it depends on what you want.
Nah, just based on my warm-ups. So I try to get into the same rep range that I'm planning to use for the whole training cycle. So if I'm planning to do, I don't know, we'll make up a movement. Hammer incline for 6 to 10 reps on my first set for the whole training cycle. On my first day back on it, I will guess what my top set weight should be based on how my warm-ups are moving, which I think any experienced lifter can do. If I get it slightly wrong,
If I go too heavy, I'll lower the weight for the second session and probably get it right on the second session. If I go too light, I'll raise the weight for the second session. But definitely by the second session and 100% by the third session, I'll have the weight in the right rep range. But I try to get it right on the first try. How will you go about fixing the pressing imbalance? I'm probably going to switch exclusively to unilateral pressing work. One arm at a time is key, and the weak arm first, because even doing something like dumbbells, you can see that you'll like twist your body to use the stronger side more, and it reinforces the balance rather than fixing it. So I'm going to do some type of unilateral work with my weak arm first. I'm not sure yet if it'll be on machines. Machines is going to be easier, like something like the hammer strength machines. But I'm really committed to getting strong on dumbbells this year, so I might try to make it work with dumbbells. And once the gap narrows a bit, I'll probably go back to doing the movements normally. But right now, for example, on the machine chest fly, I got 280 for 6 with my right arm. And last week I got 300 for 12 using both arms, which means that was mostly my left arm. And that's just a huge gap. So on Instagram's Q&A, you can send somebody a picture instead of like typing a question. And someone sent me a picture of a paragraph question, and I roasted them for that. So if you want to read it, it's right here. Kind of barely alive right now, so bear with me on the volume here. As far as novices wasting their noob gains, it's impossible. That can't happen, because the noob gain phenomenon is essentially just a rapid adaptation to a new stimulus. So what's probably happening with this particular individual is that they're still doing something grossly wrong and not reporting it correctly. Maybe lack of sleep, could be lack of effort, it could be they're still not doing things correctly nutritionally, or it could be that in the 2 years that they were taking around, they already did get a bit of their noob gains and they just have really poor genetics. But there is nothing mechanistically that would stop you or have you waste your noob gains. It's impossible. I've seen people who have been training for 10 years, just going to the gym and lifting the same weight and the same reps every single time, and then they go on a novice linear progression and add 100 pounds to that lift over the course of 6 months. So mechanistically, that's not possible. It's probably something in between his ears. All right, everybody. Thank you for following along and participating in these Q&As. If you have a question about anything I've said in this one, just leave it down below. Like the video if you liked the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share, all that good stuff. Have a good one, friends.